Hello and welcome to the Brave Hearts, Bold Minds podcast, Growing Fine Young Men. I'm Lee Hatcher. Thanks for joining me as we explore how to build a boy, how to shape his character, who he truly is, to see him grow into the fine young man of tomorrow. Each week, we're seeking to help parents of school-age boys with very practical ideas of how to shape their boys for their own good and the good of the world. So let's ring the bell and meet our guest, our special guest for this week's podcast. With me today is Professor John Stackhouse. John is an award-winning scholar and writer from Crandall University in Canada, who's a visiting fellow with the Scots College, and his topic is Boys Need Truth. Professor, welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you.
It's great to meet you. Thanks very much for your time. Now, this might sound a funny thing to say in an era of fake news and alternative facts, and in a society that treats truth more and more carelessly and casually. What's the big deal about truth, John?
Well, truth is simply the correspondence of an assertion or a representation with the reality that it is supposed to depict. So if I take out a serviette napkin and I grab a pen and I say, here, I'm going to draw a quick sketch of Sydney Harbour and show you where the bridge is and show you where the Opera House is. To the extent that you could go down to Circular Quay and find your way to those two structures with the aid of my scribbled map, it would be true. To the extent that you get hopelessly lost and find yourself at, say, Scots College, it would be untrue. So truth is crucial to navigating the world. If we don't understand the reality of things, we literally get lost, we lose our way.
Especially in relationships.
Indeed. In fact, the interesting thing about truth in that regard is that one can be or not be a true friend. And what we mean by that is that you act in a way that corresponds to the values that we associate with friendship, kindness, honesty, loyalty, and so on. And if we do not give each other the truth and act as true friends, we rob each other of the opportunity of living in the world as it really is.
Yeah.
And misstating the truth, lying, is particularly mischievous because it is actually an attempt to distort the world and cause people to react to things that, as it were, aren't there.
For a long time, as a journalist, where the issue of truth is a big issue, either way, I've thought if I don't have truth between me as a broadcaster and my audience, or between us as friends or my wife and myself, if we don't have truth or can't have truth, we don't really have much at all, do we?
We really don't in the kind of journalism that you were practicing. And I would think in any journalism worthy of the name. I think that we can all enjoy imaginative fantasy. We can all enjoy satire, and we can all enjoy fiction, but we need to know, to enjoy it properly, what it is we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And there is a sense of being cheated when we find out that what we were taking as truth really isn't. There's a kind of moral contract between us that if we're in this certain kind of conversation, you are obliged to tell me the truth, and I'm obliged to return it.
Because when truth is shattered, it's hard to get what there was there back again, isn't there?
Oh, that's right. Relationships fundamentally depend on truth.
Yeah. So again, when even, and often especially our leaders deal in fake news, alternative facts, core promises and non-core promises, how does a boy, how do we all hang on to a true notion of truth?
There's a kind of humility that is required where I will submit to the world as it is, and I will conform my speech to the world as it is rather than the way I prefer it to be, or rather than the way I'm going to try to make it and manipulate it. Our politicians, when they fail to tell us the truth, are exerting power, and they are exerting their power over us to try to get us to do what they want us to do by causing us to think the way they want us to think. And there's a kind of terrible pride there that refuses to be humble enough to submit to the way things are and take your lumps if things aren't going the way you'd like. So that's why people who are powerful typically distort the truth, because they enjoy changing the world toward their preferences. And we have to be careful in our own little lives not to do the same.
Is trust retrievable once truth is broken.
It is, and thanks be to God, people can admit what they've done, tell the truth about that, say that they're sorry, acknowledge what had happened and the transgression there. Other people can forgive, and we can be reconciled. I would say, in fact, that this is common, and it should be even more common, because we all are weak. We do sometimes prefer to avoid the truth. I've been married a long time, and I like my wife to think well of me. And when I've messed up, I would prefer to lie about it than to see that look in her eyes when I've disappointed her. The same is true of my friends or my colleagues. But that's selfish. It's literally egocentric to try to distort the world to suit my preferences. And if instead I tell the truth, I've always found my beloved to be willing to accept and forgive me after, of course, she's punished me. And then we can go on together.
Yeah. You're interested in two forms of truth in particular, academic truth and truth in faith. Can you explain what they are, what they look like, and perhaps if they're or how they are connected?
Well, what I take to mean academic truth would be the kind of truth that is essential to the life of learning, the life of scholarship. I was talking to some teachers earlier today saying that there are values inherent in all of our academic studies. Chief among those would be truth. You can't be a scholar, a teacher, or a student without being committed to telling the truth. These are the facts. This is an error. This is good work. That's bad work. These are a good set of scholarly authorities. Those really aren't. You have enough here, you don't have enough there. So the whole enterprise of scholarship and learning depends on a total commitment to telling the truth.
Yes.
And taking your lumps, which is to say your lower grades, if you're not telling it very well. And then there's truth in faith. And because faith is relational, truth is multidimensional. Now I have to tell truth. I have to live in accordance with the truth. I have to keep my commitments that I have made in truth. And so in that sense, it's much more full-orbed than the more narrow sense of commitment to describing reality that would be academic truth. There's a sense in which truth and faith is living in the truth.
Yeah. For a place like the Scots College, where Christian truth is very much at its foundation in so many ways, are there particular considerations on the issue of truth with Christian faith or other faiths, especially in a multi-faith world or a secular world in which we live?
If Scots is going to continue to be true to its heritage and to its Christian identity, a number of things follow when it comes to truth. Scots needs to teach the truth about non-Christian religions and about alternative ways of living. There can't be any shading of the truth to make Christianity supposedly look better and alternatives look worse. There's no reason, in fact, for a Christian to sell short any of the alternative philosophies or religions of the world. We have to be honest brokers with the boys about that. At the same time, we need to be careful not to be shy about the truth of the Christian faith, its claims, about the truth of life well lived in discipleship to Jesus, and about the value added to life when it is properly focused on the Christian faith.
We talk about this in greater depth in another podcast on the issue of faith, but in this world, my truth's my truth, yours is yours, so we just tolerate each other. What do you say to that?
Well, it's loose talk, and we have to be willing to be gracious and allow each other loose language, because truth really is simply an objectively accurate description of the state of affairs. But it's true that you have your interpretation of things, and I have my interpretation of things. That actually is the case. And in as much as we can coexist as neighbors and as fellow citizens with different views of the world and still cooperate, that's fine. That's what it means to live in a pluralistic society. If, on the other hand, your version of the truth and mine conflict in an important way, I think that molesting children is bad and you think it's good, then we have a different kind of situation and we can't shy away from it.
Yes. John, is truth the same as certainty in our world?
Truth is a quality of propositions or representations. They are more or less true as they correspond to the thing that they're supposed to depict. So a picture is true, or a statement is true, or a mathematical formula is true. Certainty has to do with my or your psychological or what we call epistemic state of mind. It has to do with whether I can know that truth and know that I know that truth without ever being wrong. And I've suggested that to know that I know something and to know that I couldn't possibly be wrong about that works for only two very slender categories of human knowledge. One would be self-evident truths. All bachelors are unmarried, true by definition. 2 + 2 = 4, true by definition. Or states of mind. I can't be less than certain that I am in pain if in fact I'm in pain. But beyond those two very narrow categories, philosophers show us, everything else is up for grabs. I might be in the matrix. I might be a man dreaming I'm a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming I'm a man, as Zhuangzi says. And so in that sense, Christians believe that they walk in the truth, but they have faith in God that they walk in the truth. We can't have certainty that we do.
No. What if truth hurts? And what if I know that truth will hurt someone?
The Christian imperative is to speak the truth in love. Christians are not supposed to simply go around announcing everything they think they know, regardless of the consequences.
Just because you know God, you don't know everything.
And just because you know truths about someone else doesn't mean you are obliged to announce them to everybody else. There is a time for privacy, for confidentiality, for discretion. As teachers, we know lots of things that our boys don't know, but we try to share those truths in an age-appropriate way and in the appropriate context. So there's lots of ways in which Christians who know the truth or know various truths need also to be wise and compassionate in the sharing of those truths.
What about little white lies? Are they okay? And are they perhaps understandable?
I think that's a brilliant question, and I'm so glad you asked it, and you're also looking very, very attractive today.
That's the way you're answering it. But it's easy to tell a little white lie and avoid the truth.
Of course it is.
Is that good enough?
Well, to me, it really depends. Frankly, it depends fundamentally on motive. I think that not just little white lies, but fairly strong lies, I think, and I've said in print, can be justified as a Christian if, in fact, the motives are right and the consequences have been looked at, and it is the least bad alternative. So when the great German pastor and theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer lies to the Gestapo about his fellow conspirators trying to assassinate Hitler, I think he did the right thing in an awful situation. But, boy, you better be sure that you've eliminated all the other alternatives.
It's a very tricky line to cross.
It is.
So once you've crossed that time, well, there could be another time.
And there may well be, and that's why we do it at our peril. And I'm glad you've asked that, because little white lies, in the nature of the case, are little. And one has to say, is my integrity worth it? Is it really going to be worth it to give it up, in a sense, for this small occasion? Usually not.
Good question. What would you say is the point of a pursuit of truth? For instance, in a school, what's that going to look like in a boy at school? What would you say to his teachers about this?
Well, I'm pretty omni-curious, and I would say that it's usually better to know something than not know it. Almost all the time. It's usually better to know more than know less. I will love being in the world more. I'll have a greater sense of wonder and appreciation. I'll be able to negotiate it more safely and effectively. And so there really isn't a good reason for boys not to exert themselves in class and for teachers not to try to teach them all they properly can. At the same time, we're all wired differently. God's given us different kinds of interests, and there are some things, frankly, I just can't be interested in. I'm trying, but they're just dull to me, or I'm dull to them, really. And that's okay, because, frankly, life's full. And as parents know, even better than their boys, there isn't enough time even to follow all of our own interests. And so the pursuit of truth is a wonderful thing, but it should be according to our particular callings. If I spread myself too thin, if I just click on everything on the internet that seems interesting, I am not going to do the will of God, and I'm not going to do anyone else any good.
Yeah. Can I take you finally into the home of a boy? What would you say to his parents about how they can nurture a sense of truth and truthfulness in everyday life?
I think that what I have found helpful as a kid and then as a parent and as a teacher, my wife and I have raised 3 sons to adulthood, is to try to help them see why we're insisting on things and not just insist on them. To try to show them how life is worse if it is constantly being blurred and distorted by lies, by even little white lies, even well-intentioned lies. Because if you're not telling the truth, you're lying. And so to see that generally, as tough as it is, if you're trying to be an adult and live responsibly in the world, you need to see the world as clearly as possible, and that means we owe each other the truth.
And often in the little things, where the little white lies probably a bit easier and a bit more expedient.
Musicians and athletes will tell you that you perform as you practice. And if you are practicing telling little white lies, when the chips are down and you have to come across with the truth, you've trained yourself to avoid the truth, and that's very dangerous territory.
What great wisdom and what a great conversation about such an important thing for our world. Professor John Stackhouse, thank you so much indeed for speaking with us.
Thank you, David.
If you'd like more information about growing your boy into a fine young man, you can subscribe to receive really useful articles and news from the Scots College. It's free and offered to every parent who wants the very best for their boy in their journey to manhood. In your internet search engine, enter the Scots College e-newsletter to subscribe. I'm Lee Hatcher. Hope you'll join me again next week on the Brave Hearts, Bold Minds podcast, Growing Fine Young Men. My final question is, as a visiting fellow, have you ever rung the Scots College bell?
No, I haven't.
This is your opportunity. May you please ring us out, Professor.